Hey everyone, this is Fragger here from Achievement Hunter here doing another episode of Retroactive, where I'm going to be finishing the Legacy of Kain 2-fer with Soul Reaver. During the course of doing Retroactive, I've said a few games that are my favorite of all time. We've never really given you guys a definitive, top 5, because that's not what this is about, except doing it now. It goes Metroid Prime, Mass Effect 2, Deus Ex, Soul Reaver, then System Shock 2. So when I say that I love Soul Reaver, you now have a little bit of bearing on that. I hope that informs you guys of where I'm coming from when I have my mouth firmly on this game's dick. Okay, let's dig into it. Soul Reaver takes place a fair amount of time after the events of Blood Omen, and Raziel plays one of Kain's disciples. Things go bad when he decides to grow wings for everybody else. Kain throws a hissy fit and throws him into a bottomless pit of water, and he eventually hits the bottom. Raziel, pissed off and more undead than he usually is, comes back and decides to get revenge on Kain and everything that he's done to the land of Nosgoth since he's been gone. Which is a lot, and there's not a lot of people left. It's kind of sad. At its core, Soul Reaver is pretty much a Metroidvania type game. You go around, you get an ability, use that ability to get to the other areas. Now you can come back to those areas later with other abilities and get other things, which is the more Metroidvania style of doing things as opposed to Legend of Zelda, which is you go to a dungeon, you get an ability halfway through, which then allows you to complete the dungeon, and then you move on to the next one. That's usually how these things go. And that's the interesting thing about Soul Reaver, is the fact that it never clicked to me that it was a Metroidvania game until I started, breaking it down for the sake of this video. It's an action-adventure platformer when you're running around flipping an ungodly amount of blocks. You could pretty much call Soul Reaver Block Puzzles the game. They actually made fun of that when they were making the sequel, saying, guys, we're not going to make that many block puzzles this time. In the first dungeon that you go to in Soul Reaver, there's no joke, 3 block puzzles in a row that you have to do. One of them multi-leveled. Thanks, guys. Other than stuff like that, Soul Reaver has a nice little mixture of fun combat. For a game that's 14 years old, this has some really good voice acting in it, and a pretty neat story. That kind of half changes when it gets to the sequel. Soul Reaver 2 decides to take exactly where this game ended, which was where Kain jumped into Portal and Raziel follows him. The game is pretty much like, lols, I'm over. So what ends up happening is the fact that you've got time jumping here. Raziel pretty much sets out to stop everything that Kain has done over time, and pretty much the entire timeline gets fucked because of this. When I was talking in the previous video about why everything's so confusing in this game and why it's got a really complex and weavy storyline that's fairly akin to the Metal Gear games, this is the reason. You've got massive amounts of time travel happening in Soul Reaver 2, which, because of this time travel, is what makes Blood Omen 2 happen. Blood Omen 2 is a direct consequence to things that happen in Soul Reaver 2 because of timeline fuckery. That just tells you how much happens in this game when a sequel is allowed to exist due to timeline fuckery. Holy shit. Mechanically speaking, Soul Reaver 2 is actually fairly similar to the first game, although is slightly more linear than the last one, plus time travel. Raziel's side of Defiance is a little more puzzly than Kain's was. Kain is just run in, smack people in the face, and Raziel kind of does puzzles. Raziel smacks people around with a Reaver blade plenty of times, but it is more like, here's the puzzle side of things, while Kain gets to run around and smack people. It's kind of how it goes. But that's it. That's these games in a nutshell. So, what would I like to see done? As I mentioned last video, I would love to see the series come back. So a lot of people mentioned that the creator really doesn't want to come back, but that doesn't mean we can't revisit this series. We can't start it over, try something different with it. I mean, these characters are awesome and all, but I would love to see something else happen in this universe. Then again, truckloads of money never hurts anything. But when it really boils down to it, do I want to see these games reappear as remakes? Yes. I really like Soul Reaver. Soul Reaver actually doesn't look too bad for the age of the game that it is. You can kind of tell it's a little bland, but, paint some new textures on that shit and it'll look fine. Soul Reaver 2 looks pretty damn good, especially for a game that came out a year after the PS2 launched. I mean, you can tell right here, it doesn't look that bad at all. And Defiance is, well, Defiance. It's okay. So, giving these games a nice coat of paint and releasing them would be cool. I mean, Soul Reaver 2 would probably be the easiest to do, but the problem is that Soul Reaver 2 is very dependent on the first game. I mean, the beginning cutscene in the game is literally the end of the first game, so it'd be super duper confusing. Then again, that didn't really stop them from putting Metal Gear Solid 2 on the 360, where you can't play the first game at all. So who knows what they're gonna do with this shit. I mean, Eidos has been re-releasing games lately. I mean, we got a new Tomb Raider recently, and we got a new Hitman recently, and we got a new Deus Ex recently. So who the hell knows what they're gonna throw at us next? Hopefully it's the new Legacy of Kain games. There is a rumor going around that they may in fact do that, but who knows? Personally, Just add like a nice version of Soul Reaver with decent controls. I mean, fuck. Controlling it with a controller, you gotta use the fucking bumpers to rotate the camera. That's not fun. But that's gonna do it for me, and I'll see you guys next time.